We have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large
resources.
faucet.
British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty, saying the current administration is reviewing its international engagements.
The deadly and devastating wildfires in Los Angeles are drawing new attention to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's comments about one of Canada's most valued natural resources.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. What if I told you that water, the one resource we've always assumed was neutral, untouchable, and above politics, has now been dragged straight into a geopolitical struggle? In February 2025, Donald Trump didn't just revive debates on tariffs or trade. He openly demanded access to Canada's Columbia River and even the Great Lakes, hinting that Washington might tear up long-standing agreements that have governed those waters for decades. Behind closed doors, he reportedly described the Columbia as a giant faucet that America should simply redirect south. Almost overnight, negotiations over the 1961 Columbia River Treaty were suspended, leaving one of North America's most critical frameworks for hydropower and flood control hanging in uncertainty. Ottawa's reaction was swift and defiant. Prime Minister Carney fired back with a simple but loaded statement: Canada is not for sale. And with that, the conversation shifted. This was no longer about tariffs or trade routes. It was about sovereignty, survival, and the future of fresh water. The stakes couldn't be higher. Nearly 20% of the planet's surface freshwater lies north of the U.S. border. The idea that such a resource could become a bargaining chip introduces an unsettling new reality. Water itself may soon be weaponized, not only as a vital commodity, but as leverage in international negotiations. Are we witnessing the opening moves of that future? While the water fight dominated headlines, something quieter but equally significant was unfolding. As America wrestled with shrinking port activity and fragile supply chains, Canada was laying the groundwork for a bold alternative. Prime Minister Carney reframed the Port of Churchill, not as a forgotten relic of the past, but as a cornerstone of his 2025 infrastructure strategy. The numbers reveal the seriousness of the effort. Ottawa pledged $50 million over 5 years to modernize operations, while more than $300 million was funneled into restoring the Hudson Bay Railway. Long considered Churchill's weakest link, partnerships have followed. Arctic Gateway Group joined forces with shipping giant FedNav, signing a memorandum of understanding to develop long-term Arctic trade routes. The vision is clear. Churchill is a northern launchpad for liquefied natural gas and critical minerals bound for Europe. By bypassing U.S. ports altogether, Canada isn't just creating a new export path, it's experimenting with independence in global trade. The deeper question is whether this small Arctic hub could grow into a geopolitical shield against American leverage. Yet for Churchill to rise, something else had to falter. South of the border, U.S. ports, once unrivaled hubs of global commerce, are facing a slowdown few could have imagined. By May 2025, total container throughput fell to just over 2.17 million TEUs, nearly a 10% drop in a single month. The West Coast bore the worst of it. Los Angeles saw an 18.4% plunge, while Long Beach collapsed even further, down 22.4%. For Los Angeles, the numbers told a sobering story. Only 716,619 TEUs moved, the lowest figure in more than 2 years. Much of this decline traces back to China. As trade tensions escalated, Chinese exporters sharply scaled back shipments, leaving American ports underutilized and exposing vulnerabilities across U.S. supply chains. Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, sounded the alarm. The West Coast had just 5 to 7 weeks of full inventory buffer left, a timeline that underscored how quickly strain could turn into crisis. Against this backdrop, Churchill significant shifts dramatically. What once looked like a remote outpost is now being reframed as a credible alternative to a trading system increasingly hesitant to rely on U.S. infrastructure. Its very remoteness, the icy, often overlooked edge of Hudson Bay, has become part of its strategic value. In times of disruption, distant from traditional choke points can mean resilience. Evidence of this shift is already visible. Grain shipments and high-value minerals are being rerouted toward Hudson Bay, flows that previously would have passed through Seattle, New York, or other long-established U.S. gateways. For Ottawa, the strategy is not merely about efficiency. It is about reconfiguring the geography of trade itself. Carney has deliberately tied Churchill's development to Europe, elevating transatlantic commerce into a central pillar of Canada's economic reset. Geography adds momentum to the plan. Routes from Hudson Bay to northern Europe can shave days off transit compared with American channels, while sidestepping congested maritime corridors increasingly vulnerable to tariff wars, supply chain shocks, and climate disruptions. In an age where speed and reliability are as valuable as price, those advantages matter. The result is that Churchill is evolving into more than just a port. It is being positioned as a test case in strategic independence, proof that Canada can carve out its own role in a turbulent global economy. For a world accustomed to seeing the United States dominate the flow of goods, the symbolism is striking. Churchill, once marginal and forgotten, now stands at the intersection of geography, politics, and resilience. While water disputes and port slowdowns may appear to be separate stories, they are in fact deeply connected. Together, they signal a shift in the balance of power across North America. If water can be leveraged as a bargaining chip, and if Arctic port can rise as alternatives to American hubs, then the assumptions that underpin decades of stability are no longer guaranteed. The United States may still command immense economic weight, but its vulnerabilities are widening. Canada, often viewed as a junior partner, is beginning to chart paths that bypass American pressure points. And in that unfolding story, the Columbia River, the Great Lakes, and the frozen docks of Hudson Bay are not just resources or infrastructure. They are the front lines of a new geopolitical contest that IT is often described as a defensive instrument, a kind of trade shield meant to absorb volatility and give exporters a layer of insulation from shifting global winds. The question today is no longer whether Canada's northern port of Churchill can function, but how far its role might expand. Could it evolve into a permanent fixture of North Atlantic supply chains, or remain only a niche solution born out of temporary political conditions? As Churchill gathers momentum in trade, another front of tension is opening, and this one is not about shipping lanes, but about something far more elemental. Water, long assumed to be neutral and beyond politics, is being pulled directly into the bargaining table. Donald Trump has described Canada's rivers and lakes as vital to America's survival, linking them explicitly to the droughts and shortages crippling the U.S. South. His message has been unambiguous. Washington expects Ottawa to share access, even if that means rewriting or abandoning agreements that have defined cross-border cooperation for decades. For Canada, the implications run much deeper than policy. When Prime Minister Mark Carney declared that fresh water cannot be treated as a commodity for exchange, it underscored how quickly economic disputes can slide into questions of sovereignty. What began as a trade confrontation is now testing the boundaries of essential resources. The dilemma is stark. When does cooperation end and control begin? Rather than back down, Ottawa has attempted to turn the crisis into an opportunity. The clash over freshwater and trade have become a catalyst for sharpening Canada's identity, not as a junior partner tethered to Washington's choices, but as an active gatekeeper of resources and trade routes. Carney has framed this identity shift explicitly, casting Canada as a new gatekeeper of North America, a phrase designed to project both independence and responsibility in equal measure. This positioning is more than rhetoric. On the ground, policies are being reshaped to support it. Infrastructure projects that once languished in regional debates are being elevated to the category of national major projects, granting them political priority, accelerated approvals, and financial insulation from changes in government. The message is deliberate. Trade corridors and export routes are no longer simply commercial ventures. They are part of Canada's strategic architecture. Montreal and Churchill now stand as twin anchors in this reorientation. Montreal functions as the established Atlantic Bridge, while Churchill offers a northern shortcut with untapped potential. The aim is not only to diversify markets, but to weave a resilient network capable of withstanding geopolitical shocks, whether they stem from tariffs, sanctions, or climate disruptions. Canada is also tying this trade recalibration to its broader resource strategy. Critical minerals, liquefied natural gas, and expanded energy partnership with Europe are being cast as pillars of a new economic counterweight, assets that can fuel growth but also serve as bargaining power. This model of sovereignty through infrastructure and resources offers resilience, yet it also sharpens the edges of North America's internal balance. At what point does asserting independence slide into provoking confrontation? And how does Ottawa navigate the delicate line between cooperating with its closest ally and pursuing long-term autonomy? What began as a North American dispute is now echoing far beyond the continent. Tensions between Canada and the United States have reframed both trade and freshwater as matters of international security. Agreements once celebrated as models of cooperation, such as the Great Lakes Framework, suddenly look fragile, their durability no longer guaranteed. The stakes are enormous. If these arrangements were to unravel, nearly a fifth of the world's surface freshwater could be pushed into a state of political and legal uncertainty other nations are watching closely. European and Asian governments are aware that disruptions here could ripple outward, touching energy supplies, shipping routes, and mineral markets thousands of miles away. Meanwhile, Churchill's rise is attracting new global attention. The possibility of an Arctic hub capable of shortening transatlantic routes and bypassing U.S. ports hints at a structural shift in supply chains. If the experiment succeeds, it would not only change how goods move between continents, but could also redefine the very geography of global commerce. Yet the larger danger remains unresolved. Could freshwater itself become the trigger for future conflicts? The 21st century has already been marked by disputes over oil, gas, and trade.